This case is Dracula meets the Sons of Anarchy.
I've never seen anybody go to this length to dispose of and conceal the body.
They told us that there was no body to look for.
The most offensive thing I can think of, to do that to another human being, alive or dead.
It was a genius plan that they concocted.
They thought they were smart. They were completely outmatched.
In early February 2020, a person by the name of Doneg Palumbo came into the Upper Darby Police Department to report her son, Keith Palumbo, missing.
I went up the steps and the man said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, I want to report my son missing." And the first thing he asked me was, "How old is your son?" And I said, "He's 36.
Love you.
And I said, "Something's wrong. It's not like him to not call me."
Keith and I became best friends in nursery school. When I first found out he disappeared, yeah, I was like instantly sick to my stomach, but because I knew deep down, like, that's not Keith. He would never let his mother worry like that.
We learned that Keith was a very beloved person within the community.
Keith was a lifelong resident of Delaware County, Pennsylvania. He was an accomplished musician.
He had a toy guitar when he was maybe like 4, and keyboard, little keyboard, any kind of instrument, really. He just loved music. He started 2 different bands with 2 different groups of friends.
Keith was a prodigy. It was unbelievable, like, how fast he could move his fingers. I mean, he was gifted.
His mother, Dottie, told me that one of the pieces of jewelry that Keith wore all the time was a gold-plated guitar pick.
It says, "Keith, never let the music stop. Love, Mom." And he always wore it. He always had it on.
He was just cool, man. Without even trying, he was just cool. Keith was fearless. He was tough. He was a badass. You know, he's not one to tuck tail and run away.
It was the night Keith went missing. Keith came in, he went upstairs and got changed. And when he came down, he grabbed a couple pieces of pizza. And he said, "I'll see you later."
Dottie stated that he left in her silver vehicle. From that night, he was never seen or heard from again. This case is at the forefront of our minds. So Keith was entered into the national database as a missing person, and then from there we have a checklist that we follow. We call all the local hospitals, the morgues, the prisons, homeless shelters, any other places that we believe that we would be able to find Keith, without any success. We also put in a request to the cell phone provider to obtain his cellular phone records. And we did prepare an alert for Keith as well as Dottie's silver vehicle. As part of my research into Keith, I located a report from January 28th, 2020, in which he was a gunshot victim.
That is approximately 2 weeks to his reported going missing.
Police officers went to the hospital and attempted to interview him. He would not identify the person who shot him. I reasonably believe that Keith was in fear for his life at that time. We were all thinking, did this have something to do with his disappearance? I believe that Keith had some skeletons in his closet. He had some secrets. It is my job to sort through all of the information that we're getting and kind of do a deep dive into his life.
In interviewing Keith's family, they indicated to us that Keith and someone by the name of Michael DeLuca had been lifelong friends since childhood.
Michael and Keith, they were very good friends. I mean, they were always over my house. They were at my house for birthday parties.
He looked out for me and Keith and all, and we never had anything to worry about or fear. Like when we were with Mike. Mike DeLuca was one of our core best friends. Like he was our brother.
I began looking into Michael DeLuca. He has a very distinctive appearance to him. Shaved head, tattoos all over his head and neck. You can't mess him from a mile away.
Michael DeLuca also had a lengthy criminal history, a violent criminal history. He had only recently gotten out of jail for shooting his girlfriend.
We learned that when he came home from prison, he thought he was going to step into the role as the leader of the local chapter of the Warlocks Motorcycle Club.
The Warlocks organization, specifically the Harpy Warlocks, are a 1% organization within Philadelphia and the surrounding counties.
For most of these biker groups, violence is a calling card. A lot of guys in these biker groups are hardened criminals.
Keith was not a member of the club, but he was absolutely surrounding himself with some pretty dangerous people that could turn on him in the blink of an eye. Anybody could have been responsible for Keith's disappearance.
But one of the interesting things that we found was that Michael DeLuca was also missing. He was nowhere to be found. We thought that perhaps this could possibly be connected to Keith's disappearance.
We were frustrated because we are getting numerous pieces or tidbits of information from various sources. Whoever is responsible for Keith's disappearance made our investigation difficult. But we got a break in the case when a patrolman found Dottie's car in Kensington.
So this is a missing persons investigation. Now you have a car turn up in Kensington, a feared neighborhood. In Philadelphia, I think that was the real surprise for investigators. But if they had never covered a case like this, and they're dealing with an outlaw motorcycle gang, this is the potential now to really open a can of worms.
Keith Palumbo was last seen on February 6, 2020 in Upper Darby Township.
He was in his mother's vehicle, which was a silver vehicle.
Investigators put out an alert looking for this car. Days later, they found it in Kensington.
Normally, when we find people or vehicles in the Kensington section of Philadelphia, my initial thought is they're involved in the drug trade.
It is a supermarket for heroin and drugs. People come from all over the country to go to Kensington to use heroin. It is not unusual to see dozens of people bent over at the waist, staring at the ground. It's a cesspool up there.
The detectives were left wondering why was Mrs. Palumbo's car in Kensington and where was Keith Palumbo.
Keith, number one, would never leave my car anywhere, and number two, he wouldn't be in Kensington. Keith had a problem with drugs when he was younger, but he had been sober for over 10 years.
We thought maybe someone left the car up in Kensington to make it seem like Keith may have relapsed. They thought they had the perfect plan to get rid of Keith. So the car was processed for any latent prints or any physical evidence, but it was wiped clean.
We believe that there was an effort to try to stay ahead of the police.
It was very difficult. Whoever did this obviously went to extreme lengths to conceal their crimes. It's very evil, very calculating. I was thinking, what could have happened to Keith? And is this a potential homicide case? And where is this body?
When I found out the car was found in Kensington, I'm talking to Dottie, Keith's mom, and we're trying to work this out. We're trying to figure this out. I was every night wondering, where is Keith? Where's my best friend? Like, is he alive? Is he dead?
We posted on Facebook. I mean, we were almost 24 hours a day trying to get leads from people that might know something.
At the same time, Keith's best friend and member of the Warlocks, Michael DeLuca, was still missing, which was out of the ordinary. We were trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And we needed to delve into how Michael DeLuca fit into the investigation. But while we were investigating Keith's disappearance, rumors were flying that Keith could be an informant for the police. A lot of the Warlocks club members thought he was a snitch. We learned that there was an incident between Keith and a patched-in member of the Warlocks motorcycle group by the name of Buck Evans. Keith was in a house that belonged to Buck Evans' son. Buck Evans' son was allegedly dealing drugs out of that house. Shortly after Keith left that house, the police raided that house and arrested Buck Evans' son. So Buck thought Keith had snitched on his son.
We've dealt with Buck Evans before in different capacities as the Upper Darby Police Department. He was in and out of prison for an array of crimes, but I've talked to the jurisdictions involved and the police departments and the detectives involved. 100%, Keith was not a police informant or a snitch.
That's pretty much the worst thing you could do from where we come from, is to rat on someone, be a snitch. Keith lived by a code, he was loyal, but he was riding with some pretty dangerous guys.
These guys, they can turn on anybody. Everything is on the table. And now you really have to wonder what happened.
We're all trying to stay hopeful and positive, but it's harder and harder to remain positive and optimistic as the weeks went by.
As time went on, I knew that he was already gone. because it was too long of a time for him to stay away from us.
We thought that perhaps Keith was probably the victim of homicide. But at this point, he's still listed as a missing person. So without Keith's body, without locating him, there's really nothing unless someone could lead us to Keith. And that stymied us a little bit.
There were a lot of scenarios. Keith disappears, they don't know where he is. DeLuca disappears, they don't know where he is. They're close friends. Coincidence that they're both disappearing at the same time?
We knew that Warlock's member, Buck Evans, has a dislike for Keith. We learned that he has a warrant out for a parole violation. We went after Buck Evans specifically to see if we can get him to talk about what happened.
The come to Jesus moment is when they bring Buck Evans in, and now the investigation really heats up.
Heading into the interview with Warlock's member, Buck Evans, we know that we had to play our cards right.
We knew that Buck Evans did not like Keith Palumbo. We brought him to Philadelphia Police Headquarters.
All of a sudden, Buck Evans admits that he was the one who had shot Keith previously on January 28th.
Argument with him and I popped one of the legs for you.
You shot him.
Yeah, it was leg. Because my son got it jammed up on a case.
There was a rumor going around that people thought Keith might have snitched out on that arrest, right?
Yeah, but I shot him in the leg, to be honest with you, so I am.
If Buck was admitting that he shot Keith prior to his disappearance because he believed that Keith had snitched on his own son, it certainly raises the question of, could he have shot and killed Keith Palumbo?
Buck Evans was low-hanging fruit and was our only lead, so we decided to continue with the information that he was providing us.
And here's something that you need to understand too, okay? I mean, like you're saying, somebody disrespecting a member of the club. Well, you guys handle that in the way that you handle it, okay? To the club guys, that's just doing business. To an outsider, that's like, well, what the shot him? You know what I mean? What I'm saying is, I don't want somebody to flip the script and say, well, Bucky shot the guy 2 weeks before he went missing. Obviously, Bucky killed him. You know what I mean?
Then everybody's thinking I did it. I'm like, dude, what the I didn't do it, like, you know what I mean?
It's then Buck Evans told us that before Keith went missing, something went down between Keith and Michael DeLuca in the Warlocks clubhouse in Southwest Philly.
I don't like going down there. Every time I went down, there's something bad out. Every single time I went down Southwest Philly, something bad out.
It was tough for me to wrap my mind around what possibly occurred between Mike DeLuca and Keith Palumbo, because for the simple fact that they were childhood friends, Keith trusted Mike.
Is it possible that Michael murdered his best friend? The information that was provided by Buck Evans needed to be verified. I obtained a search warrant for the Warlock Clubhouse. So it's a 2-story building. The clubhouse was on the first floor. The table in the kitchen was engraved with Warlocks on both sides of it. There was signage for the club, motorcycle parts, things that would go hand in hand with it being the clubhouse of a motorcycle group. We were looking for physical evidence of a crime. All of the carpeting was removed.
We took carpet fibers, and the walls were all painted black, which was weird. But as you just looked harder and closer through the black paint, You could see the blood spatter. I've been doing this a long time. It's very difficult to clean up a bloody crime scene.
Finally, after some deviations with people trying to throw us off, we have key pieces of evidence that something happened there.
If Keith was killed at the clubhouse, the people who were involved think they're smarter than the police because we didn't know where Keith was and we didn't have his body. Shortly after we searched the clubhouse, we had left a police officer on the property because we were still processing it, and a woman by the name of Donna Morelli, who was allegedly the leader of the Warlocks, came around and indicated that she was the owner of the property and wanted to know what was going on. We learned Donna Morelli was married to the leader of the Warlocks, but that person died, and Donna Morelli more or less inherited the club. We were wondering, could Michael DeLuca have shot Keith inside that property? So I asked her where DeLuca was staying. Donna told us he was living in the clubhouse, but she had not seen him for several days and maybe somewhere on the West Coast. So she was giving information, bits and pieces, to make it seem like she was being cooperative, when in reality, I think she felt that we would never locate him if he was on the run from the police.
Right around this time, Keith's cell phone records came back. We discovered that before Keith went missing, this cell phone was last pinging in the area of Mount Moriah Cemetery. The largest cemetery in Pennsylvania, over 200 acres.
Mount Moriah Cemetery is huge. It's probably 3 or 4 city blocks, long, deep, and wide. And it's got folks in there from before the Civil War. It's got Medal of Honor winners in there, dignitaries, celebrities. Now investigators have to wonder, could Keith Palumbo also be in the cemetery?
And then we learn that Donna Morelli's residence backs up to the cemetery.
It was also brought to our attention that she is a board member for the Friends of Mount Moriah Cemetery. So it wasn't lost on us, the fact that Donna had access to the entire cemetery, and we were wondering if Donna could be involved.
Hiding a body in a cemetery is ingenious. And when you see the number of headstones, crypts, and mausoleums in there, probably like finding a needle in a haystack.
The task before us was to find a body in a cemetery. What better way to hide a body than in a cemetery that's supposed to have bodies in it? It was April 3rd of 2020. We went looking for evidence of Keith, and I saw how large the cemetery was. It just appeared to me to be a daunting task. We probably had 20 to 25 people out there walking around the cemetery looking for any signs of things that could have been moved or were recently disturbed, or maybe a freshly dug grave. When I was walking around, I was overwhelmed. I didn't think that we would find Keith.
So we were walking around for a very long time.
And then one of the police officers who was with us happened to notice that there was a very large capstone that looked like it was a little bit off center, and that there were what we thought were fresh scratch marks, so that further aroused our suspicions.
There's cracks in it that just shouldn't be there.
And people started saying, what do you think of that?
According to the monument, the last time that anyone had been buried there was in the year of 1810. This was obviously something that needed to be explored.
So we come equipped for this specific task. We brought our endoscopy camera and we attached a flashlight to it and we put it into one of the cracks. We were all surprised of what was down there. We were thinking, is it possible? Is Keith down there?
We needed to figure out what's inside the actual crypt. We did not have the capability of moving the stone. It weighed well in excess of 2,000 pounds. So we enlisted the help of the Philadelphia Fire Department.
Rescue 1 came and they pulled that, the cover off slowly.
I remember me and Detective Bamberski just looking at each other and like, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
I was shocked that once we pulled that cover back, that it was that big underneath. It was just a massive structure underneath that you would never be able to fathom just standing there looking at it from ground level. This massive underground crypt.
Like something out of a movie. It was approximately 20 feet down to the bottom of the crypt.
This is Dracula meets Sons of Anarchy.
At that point, we had got a ladder and I went down. I had never dealt with anything like this in my career.
It was a brick structure that formed a dome, and there were a number of coffins down in the bottom of it. Then one of the investigators, upon closer look, realized there wasn't one, but there were two fresh bodies.
The one was not identifiable.
It was in a very advanced state of decomposition with a rope wrapped around the neck. We thought this was the victim of a violent death.
And then we looked at the other body, which we could identify as Keith.
He was still somewhat recognizable by his facial features, and he was still wearing the guitar pick that his mother had given him around his neck. We could see that Keith had been shot in the head 2 times. There was a blue tarp. There was all the carpeting, all the carpet padding. Looked like it had been removed from the Warlock's clubhouse, was also thrown down in the bottom of the crypt. We thought there was absolutely more than one person involved, and they were trying to get away with murder. But we did not know who killed Keith Palumbo or what happened to Michael DeLuca.
This is probably one of the more ingenious ways that I've seen of getting rid of a body.
When we found Keith, I got a feeling of relief that we could finally give Dottie the closure that she desperately needed.
It was 8 weeks we were looking for him. 2 detectives came to the door. I wasn't expecting good news, and I said, what happened? He said he was shot. As a mom, that if you lose a child, you're never going to get over it.
My best friend, my lifelong best friend, my best man at my wedding. It's like he's gone, you know, like he's not coming back. It just broke my heart. It was like the worst possible outcome was Keith was gone.
After we found the 2 bodies in the cemetery, we were curious as to whether or not members of the Warlocks were using the cemetery as a dumping ground. We knew Donna Morelli as the supposed leader of the Warlocks, so we then got a search warrant for her house.
We found a lot of handguns, and then a lot of rifles. We also confiscated Don Morelli's red pickup truck. And in the back bed, I found 4 brown carpet fibers that had matched the carpet fibers from the crypt and the Warlock clubhouse. The whole case is adding up. It's all coming in together.
When we found Keith's body, we knew that it was a murder. We knew that Keith had been killed in the clubhouse, but we did not know who actually committed the murder. But I think everybody was shocked when they realized who was responsible. Keith Palumbo was missing for 2 months. Once we recovered Keith's body, it was classified as a murder. Now we need to figure out what happened to Keith. We know that Warlock's leader, Donna Morelli's property, backs up to the border of Mount Moriah Cemetery. We thought, could she or any members of the Warlocks Motorcycle Club be responsible for Keith's murder?
We needed to see if we can get somebody to talk about what happened.
I brought Donna Morelli into the homicide unit for questioning. She admitted that Michael DeLuca and another prospect of the Warlocks, Billy Gibson, removed Keith's body from the clubhouse, put him in the back of her pickup truck, and brought it back to her house. She indicated that she's the one who opened the grave for DeLuca and Billy Gibson.
I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? You know, and he's like, you need to go show me how to open that up.
Run me through that whole scenario.
I said,
Did you drive in a truck or did you walk?
No, we walked.
Where did you walk to? Whose grave did you walk to?
I don't know the name of the grave. It was up in the circle.
Okay.
It was the closest one that I knew of. Yeah, I want to grab some poles.
Poles
I know you had a crowbar too, yeah.
I asked her, how did she open up a 2,000-pound stone? And she said, Detective, I could move a Jersey barrier with a 2x4. When we questioned Donna Morelli, she gave us a video on her phone. It clearly shows Michael DeLuca and Billy Gibson pulling up in the back of Donna Morelli's property in her pickup truck. And although you can't see Keith's body, you can clearly see the carpet and the padding from the clubhouse of the Warlocks. We needed to speak with DeLuca and Billy Gibson, but Michael DeLuca was nowhere to be found. So when we got an arrest warrant for Billy Gibson, when we got back to headquarters, he told us in detail what happened to Keith Palumbo.
I know who shot Keith, yes.
Okay, and you know that to be who?
Chaos.
Michael DeLuca was known as Chaos, and that was a pretty accurate nickname.
Keith came right up and put the gun in my head. He said, if you want to be a real warlock, you will keep your mouth shut. If not, I'll kill you, I'll kill your family, I'll kill your kids, I'll kill everybody.
As a reward for participating in the murder, Billy Gibson said he was then patched in as an official member of the Warlocks. We knew Buck Evans, he was still incarcerated on the parole issue. He also has pointed the finger at Michael DeLuca and was probably also involved in the murder. We now had to go back to Buck Evans.
You could have called 911 when you were on the street and said, my friend, Keith Palumbo, just got murdered.
I was trying to in the house. I was trying to say, no, we'll put him outside, call 911, make it look like someone else did it. I just was trying to get him help, man. Yeah, with a 40 caliber, my ear ringing, blood squirting on my face. Like, I don't you want, like, this dude was ready to kill me, bro. I don't care what anybody says. The dude's a maniac, man.
Each one of those witnesses was telling the story in a way that minimized their own involvement, which is not something unusual at all.
Mike DeLuca was not around to be able to defend himself. We were unable to locate him at that time.
We immediately set wheels in motion to locate and arrest Michael DeLuca. Coincidentally, we learned Michael DeLuca was pulled over by the police in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The police found a loaded firearm in Michael DeLuca's vehicle, and he was subsequently arrested.
Buck Evans, Billy Gibson, and Donna Morelli, they're all pointing the finger at Michael DeLuca. The consistencies amongst each one of their stories of what happened showed that they were telling the truth about Keith's murder.
Do you still consider yourself a member of the club, the Warlocks?
I'd rather not answer that.
Do you want to make a statement?
No.
We believe on the night that Keith was killed, he had his mother's car. At some point, he meets up with club members, Buck Evans and Billy Gibson. They go to the clubhouse. DeLuca came out with the firearm. And with no provocation, shot Keith in the face 2 times. After Keith was dumped in the crypt, DeLuca instructed Evans and Gibson to go up to the Kensington area and dumped Keith's mother's car. And then they all returned as if nothing had ever happened. Michael murdered his best friend for selfish reasons. He believed that Keith Palumbo was a snitch. He is a twisted individual.
Michael DeLuca pled guilty to third-degree murder. Consecutive to that 10-year sentence for the Wyoming case was a 15 to 35-year sentence in Pennsylvania. Buck Evans and Billy Gibson each pled guilty to obstruction of justice, hindering, and related charges to the disposal of Keith's body. We learned the other body found inside that crypt was David Rosillo. He was a prospect of the Warlocks. He was shot and killed by a warlock named Michael DeMoro, either late December of 2017 or very early in 2018. For the David Rosillo case, we relied heavily on the testimony of Donna Morelli, and she was given immunity for her role in that murder. With regards to Keith's murder, she was sentenced to 11.5 to 23 months, followed by a period of probation.
I've never seen anybody go to this length to dispose of a body and conceal the body. And quite frankly, it worked. I don't think that anybody would have ever found Keith had it not been for the fact that a police officer saw the way that the capstone had been moved.
We were able to lay Keith to rest, which we were so happy that we were able to do that. When I think of what Keith thought that night, when he saw what he was going to do, I can't imagine what he was thinking. Because it was his best friend pointing the gun in his face.
The case was a true whodunit mystery.
An individual was burned in 2 barrels.
It was just very cold, very calculated.
Whoever did this, they had a plan. It was definitely one of those cases where I thought maybe we met our match.